Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art. I'm your host, Novo Day, and we are back from being on break, and we are back with a quick cut because we are gearing up for a two-part series on my favorite band of all time, and that is Led Zeppelin, and of course, in a very AOTB fashion, we're going to be highlighting something that is unique to the band and doesn't get covered often. So we're going to be focusing on Led Zeppelin in a very special aspect. But before we do that, we're going to do a little quick cut and think of this as a opening act, if you will. Today, we're going to be talking music again and focusing on a very special album by Swedish duo Studio. The album in question is West Coast. Now, guys, this has got to be, how should I put it, the best kept musical secret of the last 2 decades. So this is an album that should have lit up every chart in the damn world. Like, it should have just become this crazy bonkers phenomenon, but for some reason it didn't, guys. It was kind of left under the radar, and for a lot of us, kind of forgotten until, and this is why we're talking about it today, until the album got a new life. Got a resurgence, a re-release just a few months ago on streaming sites. So the original album was only available through physical media or bootlegs, or you can get versions of it on YouTube. For some reason, we didn't get it in this form until now. And by God, this may be some of the best music of the 21st century that you've never heard. Now, before we can discuss, of course, we all need a little background. So the band Studio is a Swedish duo consisting of musicians Dan Lisvek and Rames Hägg. Now, they were founded in 2000 and were active to about 2010, so they were in the game for about a decade. Their debut album, and technically their only real album to date, is said album in question, West Coast. And though you'll see the streamable version that we'll be talking about today, you'll see that listed as the release date as January 24th, 2025. But in reality, the original iteration of the album was actually released in 2006, November of 2006. And I personally didn't get hands on it until 2007-ish with a bootleg copy. So this has been almost 20 years, guys. It's been, kind of pushed to the sideline, didn't quite find the audience it could have found. And now we have kind of a second lease on life. You can also find different versions of the album too. So if you get into the streamable version and you're kind of falling in love with the music, there is remixes and some other things. And those are in compilation albums called Yearbook 1. And they're a very special deep cut that is very hard to find, but there is a Yearbook 2. And of course, there's a Life's a Beach EP. And though this album won a number of won a place on a number of best of lists, and it was a bit of a critical darling. For some reason, just like I said, it just didn't make the impact that it should have. It didn't quite cultivate the audience that I know it has the capacity to do. But that's why we're here talking about today. Who knows? Maybe it will now. So a lot to discuss, guys. But before we do, we're going to take a little break. Stay with us.
The best way to say thank you and to support us is by donating to the cause. In doing so, you'll be able to help us help fellow artists, creatives, and colleagues, promoting their work, the community as a whole, and why we got into this line of work to begin with, to not only make art, but also shine a light on our peers and the gems of the world. For all the hidden ones and the not so hidden that make life worth living, because if we can make things even a little bit better, it'll all be worth it. But we can't do this without you. So please, donate today. And remember, even a little goes a long way to build new bridges, new worlds, and new opportunities. Link and details on how can be found in the show notes below. Because together, we can do anything.
And we are back to do the thing. And I want to start the discussion with a question. Let's start with a question, guys. And that question is simple. Why didn't this album blow up? Why didn't this turn into this crazy bonkers phenomenon as joked about in the intro? So why wasn't Studio like other similar predecessors? Say, a good example of this is Boards of Canada. Boards of Canada, who have like a cult following, like everyone and their mom seems to love Boards of Canada, often through things of word of mouth, and kind of different attributes and different vessels to gain an audience through more of the traditional means. I always wondered why Studio never quite got at least that from this very, I wouldn't even say humble beginnings. I would say they clearly swung for the fences and they nailed it. They very much nailed it. And so when I was trying to think about why this didn't turn into what it was, I came to some ideas. So here they are. There was probably a lack of market availability, so a lack of promotional marketing for the album, and vis-a-vis support. So there was no tour or anything like that, where a lot of acts, even if they're electronica or house or techno or that iteration has evolved into, so EDM, as most people call it, usually there is an opportunity for the tour or do something like that and get their name out there and be on, like a late show or be on Saturday Night Live or something. But we never really quite saw that with Studio. And to make matters worse, they also didn't continue to put out more output. There was no LP2 and 3 and 4 for people to find them and then be like, oh, they have quite a discography. I should get into maybe their earlier work, finding something like West Coast later in someone's career. Like a lot of musicians and acts will do when they're continuing kind of their legacy and building their career and things like that. And that's probably part of the reason why we didn't see a huge change in Studio's career, is because they didn't really continue to put out new music. So it was hard for people to find them when it was just this one album alone. And then of course, going back to the market availability, it was, I personally, like I said, had a bootleg copy. I couldn't find the physical copies well. And, I remember having a hard time really finding a lot about these guys. And so I think it was probably a perfect storm to create some kind of blinders, in marketing and publicity and the PR they needed to take things to the next level. And things probably stayed stagnant, plateaued. And here we are almost 20 years later talking still about their first LP, though it is a smash hit. And we'll talk about why in a minute. We'll do what we normally do on AOTB. We'll kind of go from top to bottom. I'll talk about the tracks in the album and give you kind of a picture, a glimpse, a taste of what's to come when you try to experience the album for yourself. But a quick note before we get into the album. So I discovered some very key differences between the original version of the album and the current streamable version. Some differences that some of you may need to help me with. I mean, we got some noodle scratchers. And that is because the biggest difference you'll notice is the track listing. So in the original version, the 2006-2007 version, the album is listed as Out There, West Coast, Self-Service is track number 3, Origin, Life's a Beach, and Endo. It's just a 6-track album, but though it runs almost an hour long. Now, the streamable version that you will probably find after listening to this consists of this track list. So it's the same first one, so Out There and West Coast, but then it goes Origin, Life's a Beach, and then Self-Service. So they move Self-Service and then a few up, and then it still ends with Endo. To make matters more interesting and a little confusing to me, to be quite honest, is Self-Service is a different version on the original iteration of the album versus the one that you'll get on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever streamable platform you listen to. It's going to be very different. So I do urge you to listen to the original as well and kind of compare and contrast and have fun with it. And then here's the noodle scratcher. So when I actually was doing my homework for this piece, I found like the Wikipedia page dedicated to West Coast. The Wikipedia page had the OG track listing. So that was the first one out there, West Coast self-service origin Life's a Beach in Indo. But when I actually pulled up the cover art, it looks almost exactly like what you'll see on these streaming platforms, and I'm pretty sure it is the exact same one. So the 2006 2007 original artwork has the current track listing, guys, the current track listing from this year, 2025. So I don't know. You guys make sense of that, and someone reach out to me to explain. Now, regardless, for the purposes of the show, since modern audiences are going to most likely listen to this through streamable versions of the album, so your Spotify's, your Apple Music, what have you, we're going to focus on that track list today. With that being said, let's dive into it. Starting on track number 1, it's the instrumental Out There. Now, right away, what you'll probably notice is the guitar melody. Now, this is going to be kind of a ongoing theme of me talking about the album is the guitar melodies. My God, they are so tasteful, just hypnotic. And the guitar melody on Out There acts as a kind of verse since it is an instrumental piece. It's a good introduction to the album because the album makes you feel already like you're in store for something very, very different, but also very familiar. In fact, it does an amazing job of that. Arguably the best I've ever heard it in my career of studying music. It's probably the best I've ever heard of in terms of making something like MIDI. So again, that's MIDI is musical instrument digital interface, sampling and similar mixing techniques that sound very acoustic and not digital, like we've grown to know them with your Dead Mouse and your Daft Punk. But that's kind of purposeful in a lot of those ways. So this is such a master class in making something that is made from something like MIDI and sampling and just, traditional kind of mixing, digital mixing techniques on a computer sound very acoustic. Now, with that being said, it's going to feel like it's a band playing in a room, right? You're going to have those acoustics. And though those acoustics are digital, they're purposeful. Like someone has to actually decide how the reverb sounds and all these little things that make the music come together and the arrangement sound whole and well mixed and full bodied. And but that's the uncanny valley that is West Coast is though you feel like it's a band playing in a room together, we know deep down, and we know in fact in reality it's not. Now the arrangements for these pieces, especially with Out There, are incredibly well paced. Nothing is ever overstaying its welcome. You'll see that as the compositions constantly are being reshaped and are changing and evolving. And what holds the pieces together, especially for the first half, is that they really groove, for a lack of a better word, especially after the bridge of this piece. The arrangements groove so well that they could have easily been separated into separate songs. Like this could have been a 9, 10, 11 track album, but it was, they wanted to give you something special. I feel like luckily this was condensed to like a approximately like a 15-minute track to start off the album. Though it is literally long, it feels short because it is so well paced. And because, like I said, it's incredibly thoughtful with some of the choices that it's made, it becomes just this odyssey of sights and sounds and color. A lot of color, in fact. I mean, you guys, I cannot stress this enough. You're gonna be taken on such a ride with this piece and this album. Tying this piece together is a series of offbeat reggae figures. Sometimes you'll hear that through a guitar strum. Sometimes you'll hear it through other instrumentation, through MIDI, like a steel drum, for instance. Which again, just further, it's very cyclical. That very much adds to the groove, the grooviness, the groove of the piece, while you're just bombarded by so many other textures and shifting melodic figures that easily go together seamlessly. You're going to hear seamlessly a lot through this piece because that is going to be another kind of sub-thesis to the main thesis about this music being so incredible. That takes us to track number 2, West Side, and this is the first traditional song song on the album, and the piece opens with this kind of vocal harmonic that anchors the piece, and again, drums that sound very acoustic, but as we've already discussed, are not. But again, it just adds so much flavor to the piece, and but luckily the piece quickly opens up. It doesn't waste any time. Again, nothing overstays its welcome, and we are hit with just these series of polyrhythms that really take you for, again, this ride. Luckily, the mixing is done so well that nothing is pushed too hard into the forefront. I mean, this being a traditional song with vocals and singing, you're definitely that's definitely going to get the limelight and the spotlight. But like the repeated lyric, solid good times. You're going to have a solid good time listening to the West Coast. It, of course, has more reggae pop sensibilities, a lot of offbeat accents, which again makes the piece groove, as already stated multiple times, followed by just what I would call a psychedelic kaleidoscope of color. You'll see that in a lot of these West Coast pieces. Is sometimes there'll be a bridge, sometimes they tend to do it in outros or the third act to traditional song structures, where those ending parts of the song become very psychedelic, very otherworldly, ethereal. There's really, this piece is probably going to be called a psychedelic kaleidoscope of color, because there's really no other way to put it. Like, once you listen to the album, you'll be like, oh my God, I get it. That brings us to track number 3 on the streamable version, which is Origin, not Self-Service. Here we start with the synth bass line that anchors the piece, and of course, more accented offbeat punches, and of course, more thoughtful melodies. Something to focus on in terms of the melody is that all of the melodies you'll hear on the album are very simple, but just so incredibly tasteful. Like, they could have easily been replaced with lyrics and vocals. The melodies, and sometimes counter melodies, depending on how you look at them, they just fit together so well, like puzzle pieces making a puzzle. In fact, their melody choices can be very hypnotic, and that kind of adds to that psychedelic kaleidoscope. You could, for instance, listen to a sample of one of these pieces just on repeat for like an hour. They're that soothing, they're that memorable, they're that inviting. You'll quickly fall in love with a lot of the choices here in the album. The changes are often very, again, seamless. And though this will be the first time you can really hear when what they're, or you could, if you're a fly on the wall, what you're seeing is them clicking on a mouse on a computer to change sections. So it is a little less acoustic. It's a little more digital. Yeah, for the record, there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but it helps to add to the piece, and it actually leads very well into the very digital track that is track number 4, Life's a Beach. So Life's a Beach is another instrumental, and yes, it kind of pushes more into that electronica. So we're a little more dancey on Life's a Beach, but still with acoustic flourishes here and there. So still very studio. They clearly had a vision for the sound they wanted to make, and I feel like they nailed it almost flawlessly. So very much the opposite of its predecessors in a way, or at least what we've grown to know, or what you'll grow to know as the first half of the album. And I have to say, on Life's a Beach, you're gonna feel like you're on the beach. You're gonna be enjoying those tasty waves, and you're gonna get all that vitamin D from that glorious, beautiful sun. And of course, tying it all together is, of course, you sipping on a cocktail with a cute little umbrella inside. In other words, you're going to get to this track. You're just like an actual beach, you're going to get there and you're not going to want to leave. And if you're wondering, so another kind of through line to talking about this album. So the first one is very tasteful guitar melodies, pieces that groove, often with reggae pop sensibilities, usually offbeat accents, and then of course polyrhythms. And if you're wondering what kind of polyrhythms we're talking about, think Remain in Light meets Orbital. That brings us to track number 5, Self-Service. This is the third song on the album, something that's a little more traditional with vocals and things like that. Now, I will say I do prefer the original because the original has this kind of Latin flair to it, while this one leans more on those reggae pop sensibilities and electronica. And that's probably, if I had to guess why they chose it, it probably fits into the album a little more to the lay listener's ear. Whereas when I listen to the original one, I very much find that it's a better it's a better centerpiece, if you will, to how the songs fit together. And I probably prefer the original track listing too. But regardless, they're both great songs. I urge you to try out both of them. It just actually is a testament to how the album has it. It definitely wants to bring to your attention this endless pursuit for thoughtfulness and tasteful choices. Again, most poignantly with the guitar figures. And then we end the album with the last instrumental track. So there's 3 songs and 3 instrumentals, and that is track Indo. Now this one leans the furthest into the digital, and that probably is by purpose too. So that's probably why they changed self-service, if I had to guess. Not only the song type version, but also placement, because we're a little more acoustic in the beginning of the album, and then we lean more into the traditional electronica digital. But regardless, this is such an exploration of textures again, and all these little ideas that come together just, and I can't stress this enough, seamlessly. Where the other pieces were more odysseys, more of a very specific kind of journey, this one is definitely more of a meditation. So it's a little more abstract, a little more experimental, a little more trance-like, so obviously a little more repetitive, but still very, very captivating. And you're going to end the album wanting to restart it again and listen to it over and over and over again. And there you have it, folks. That is Studio's West Coast from top to bottom. Now, before we get out of here, let's talk some conclusions. Now, usually I have my co-host give the final word, but since we're giving you a quick cut, I want to leave you with this. What is the takeaway to talking about Studio's West Coast? And I think that starts with, when it comes to putting out your art, we don't know what is going to land. I gushed about in the intro and some of the background, and definitely during the course of the album review, I often would say, I don't know why this didn't gain this incredible, huge audience. It should have been this bonkers, global phenomenon, and it just wasn't. And I think people listening can really take a very cynic approach to that outcome. Why put out anything? It's not gonna make any money. No one's gonna like it. It's not gonna gain an audience. Well, I think as artists, this is a reminder that sometimes we don't make art for a huge audience. Sometimes we don't make art for everyone else. Sometimes we just make it for ourselves. And I think the beauty of it having even a little bit of a cultural impact. For instance, I fell in love with the album, and even if your art reaches a few people, it can still be life-changing for that person. I know West Coast was life-changing for me and my musical journey, and I think it will be for you too. With that being said, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you, and we got more for you coming up with our 2-part series on Led Zeppelin. But before we do, guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. You know what to do. You can check out more at novadayproductions.com. And if you'd like to follow us, you can at _novo_day and at AOTB podcast and AOTB.podcast. One has a dot, one doesn't. If you'd like to sponsor a little love child or be on the show, you can always reach out to us at novadayproductions@gmail.com. So until next time, be good to each other. And as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love you.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Created by Novo Day and Theodore T. Buckingham. Written, directed, produced, and edited by Novo Day and the NDP Collective. Starring Philip Church of philipchurch.com, that's Philip with one L. Alexandra Parsons of alexandraparsons.com, alexandra-parsons.com. With special contributions by Theodore T. Buckingham. Music by A Company, Instagram handle A_CO_music_. Logo design by Tom Gestus of thejusticecompany.com, JESTUS. Thank you again for listening. All rights reserved.